Hello, welcome back to Shoogly Shed Motors. I have a new bike in the shed today. I say a new bike, it's actually one of my old projects from maybe about 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago. Before I moved to this shed, I built this in the original shed. I didn't actually do a video series on it at the time, but it was a great little project and I'm really glad to see it back in the shed for a few upgrades now that it has had a good 400 odd miles put on it. So yeah, let's have a quick look. This, ladies and gentlemen, is, I'm going to say 1978, I think it was. 1978-ish Kawasaki Z400. So this bike was an absolute basket case when we got it, and I did a full nut and bolt rebuild on this for a good friend of mine called Ian. Ian runs an awesome artisan bakery in a couple of sites in Glasgow called Big Bear Bakery. If you're ever in Glasgow, go and check it out for some sweet pastry treats. But yeah, Ian got me to build this bike back when I was still kind of finding my feet with bike building, and he put a lot of faith in me. And I was really chuffed with the result of this thing, and so was Ian, funnily enough. I even stitched the seat myself. You know, it's not quite up to Mr. Tom Hurley's standards, but as far as stitching your own seat goes, I was pretty chuffed with that. The engine got vapor blasted, we did a top end rebuild on it, frame powder coated, tank got painted. Yeah, it's a great little bike, and we built this basically for Ian to just, you know, poodle about on the south side of Glasgow and on nice days, and go further afield on little trips around country lanes and stuff. But he's done a good fair amount of riding on this, considering how long he's had it. And there's a few issues now that have cropped up, and we want to basically address them. Ian has kind of let the bike sort of get a bit more kind of patinate, is that a word? Patinate a little bit. You know, the bolts in the engine have started to rust up a little bit, and some of the fittings as well have kind of returned to the bit kind of rusty state, but he's pretty keen on that look. So I'm not going to detail it too much or sort too much of that out. But what we're basically wanting to do is try and get this thing running again, because it's not been run for a while. There's an electrical short somewhere that we need to try and locate. We're also going to just give it obviously a once over, and then we want to try and fit a little rear kind of mud guard on the back of the bike as well, just for a little bit more usability. We also want to try and fit a new wing mirror that's underslung to make it a little bit more manoeuvrable in the city. Yeah, a couple other wee bits and pieces to be done on it. But it's really cool to see this bike again. I really enjoyed building this, and like I said, Ian put a lot of faith in me at the time. You know, I hadn't really proved my worth yet as a bike builder, so it was cool to build this for him. And, you know, he paid me handsomely in delicious pastry treats, so I'm forever grateful for that. But yeah, I'm probably going to do a couple of more videos on this bike as we sort through some of the issues. But I thought this was a good opportunity to just show it off to you. And, you know, show a bike that I did build but didn't actually ever do a build series on. All that said, I think the first thing this bike needs is a wash. It has gotten a little bit grubby, and it's nicer to work on a clean bike than a dirty one. So probably going to get it out of the shed, get the hose out, some soapy water, and give it a good clean. now the bike is a little bit cleaner, I'm going to first of all try and figure out what the short problem is. I wired this bike, so hopefully it's nothing too bad. It could just be a wire's gotten worn somewhere and is causing a short, but I won't know until I start digging into it. Gotta get my multimeter, we'll get the seat off. It was a nice little quick release seat catch if I remember right. So it's the seat, and then I need to basically get the multimeter out, a bunch of fuses, probably just going to keep putting new fuses in, well, unplug a bunch of stuff, put fuses in, plug stuff back in and see what's blowing up the fuse. So yeah, it's a bit of a trial and error process to find this short, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. Right, I've got a big handful of 15 amp fuses, so stick them in my pocket because there's a good chance I'm going to need quite a few of them. I don't think the ignition barrel is under here. I don't think the ignition is on. I'm fairly certain it's not on. Battery's obviously disconnected. So let's first of all look at the fuse in here. So yeah, we've got a 20 amp fuse in here that's been blown. That's what I expected. Okay, first of all, just because it's easy to do, I'm going to unplug the obvious block connectors here. I believe that one is, let's see, ignition barrel. That one under there is the regulator rectifier. If I can get that plug out. I just unbolted the regulator rectifier just so I can get more slack in the cable. Try and disconnect it. This plug is very tight. Actually, the reason why this plug is tight is because it's melted. I can see that. Yes, that's not going to come out because it's melted itself together. I think I may have found an issue here. Well, it's one solution. Just pull the wires out. Just taking a quick picture of the setup here. So I can rewire it. But I'm pretty sure that's going to be the issue. I can see that a couple of the connectors have actually melted through and gone into the other connectors, so that would definitely cause a short. I'm going to bank on that being the issue. So, tell you what, I'm going to plug everything back in that I unplugged. I'm going to reconnect the battery. Now, let's put a fuse in, see what we get. Okay. So, is the ignition on? It's in neutral. Let's try the start button. Yeah. Okay, I think there's my issue. So that turned over fine. Indicators are working. Front and rear. Tail lights working. Brake light switch is working. Headlight's not coming on though. I think, if I remember rightly, I wired this to be a headlight always on. There's no headlight switch. Horn works as well. So I think that pretty much answers my question. A melted connector. Didn't take a genius to figure that out. Okay, so what melted the connector, I suppose, is my next question. I don't know if there's a short in the reg-rec or if there's a fault in the wiring. Could be either. So, do I just try and wire this back in and see if it was just a connector fault, or see if that pops a fuse again and it might be an issue with the reg-rec? First thing I'm going to do is rewire a plug or a connector onto the wires from the bike that go to the reg-rec, and then if I put new connectors on the reg-rec as well and I plug it in, if the fuse pops, then I will know the reg-rec is bad. It's just kind of using a fuse as a sort of sacrifice, but it should give me a better idea of what the issue is. And if it is just a case of the connector having gone bad and there's nothing wrong with the reg-rec, then that's a total win in my book. Right, that's the regulator rectifier rewired, new plug. Yeah, I suppose just plug it in and see what happens. So far we seem alright. Let's turn the ignition on. It's the ignition on. Fuse appears to be intact. Let's just double check. Yep. So I'm going to bank on that probably being what the issue was just the connector maybe hadn't been assembled very well and allowed a short for some reason, which then obviously melted the connector and fused the two wires together, causing a sort of permanent short, so that every time the bike was switched on it was blowing the fuse. But hey, that's what fuses are there for, isn't it? So I suppose the next thing to do is to get the bike running, and once it's running we can check the health of the regulator rectifier or just the charging system in general and see if it is charging the bike properly, and if it is, I'm going to call that good. So let's have a look at getting the bike running next. Right, I'm led to believe that there's fuel in the tank. So we put the fuel on. Let's put the carbs on choke. And let's see if it will go. Battery's a bit low by the sound of it. Let's try again. Oh, okay. That's not helpful. Battery's pretty flat. It's a shame because I can smell fuel. So, fuel I think is getting in there. Not igniting. One more shot. Nah, not gonna happen. Right, I need to put the battery onto charge then. Yeah, battery is reading at 11.8 volts, so that is flat as a pancake. Okay, just gonna have to let it charge. Not a lot I can do for the time being, but fingers crossed. The fuse hasn't gone again. It was turning over quite happily there, so fingers crossed that's that short issue sorted. Once the battery's charged, we'll see if we can get the bike running. Right, it's the next day and I have fully charged the battery, which will help a great deal. I'm also going to just check I've got spark, because it occurred to me that I did turn it over a fair amount yesterday and it didn't even attempt to start, despite the fact I could smell fuel. So I'm just going to double check that I do have a decent spark before I go and just turn this over too many times and empty the battery again. So all I've done is pulled both the spark plugs out. They don't look terrible, they look in reasonable condition. So I'm probably going to replace the spark plugs anyway as part of this kind of little service that the bike's getting, but these will do for just now. So just the usual, I'm going to stick the spark plugs into the spark plug caps like that. Make sure they're grounding and that I can see them, which I can there. Let's turn the ignition on and then let's see if I've got a spark. Decent spark on that side. Decent spark on that side as well. That's good. Well, probably going to then just put the new spark plugs in just as a matter of course. And yeah, have another go at starting it. I'm also going to put some fresh fuel in the bike because fresh fuel never hurt anyone. Unless you're in a Ben Stiller film. That's a Zoolander reference for anyone wondering. Okay, fresh spark plugs, fresh fuel. Let's put the ignition key in, that would help. Ignition on, chokes on, fuel on. Let's see if we go. Nice. bit cold. So obviously the bike's running. It doesn't run particularly well. The carbs probably need a bit of fettling, but it wasn't charging. That's basically the long and short of it. So although I replaced that connector, I think the fault is elsewhere. What I've done is I did a little bit of reading with the multimeter to check a couple of things. I checked the stator wires, which I have continuity from, and also I'm getting an AC voltage from them. So the AC is, the stator is working, and that basically points to the reg rec. I've checked the ground for the reg rec and the power going to the reg rec. That all checks out. So my guess is that something in the regulator rectifier has failed and is don't know, well, it's basically well, it's not overcharging, I don't know, it's doing something basically, but it's melted that plug, and running the bike for a couple of minutes there while I did the checks, that plug was starting to warm up again. So I think that there's definitely a fault in that regulator rectifier, and for the cost of a new one, it's definitely worth replacing and seeing if that sorts it. So that's what I've done. I've ordered a new regulator rectifier, and I'll need to wait for that to arrive before I can do any more work on that. However, in the meantime, I have an oil filter and some oil. So I'm going to drop the oil from the bike, put a new filter in it as well, just while it's here, and then that, along with the new spark plugs, is a nice little service for the bike. Obviously it's got these pod filters on it, so I'm not changing the air filters. And then hopefully with the reg rec, that will basically be the bike kind of running nicely, charging properly, and then I can move on to the little pieces of fabrication that I need to do for this. Sump plug. Oh Jesus, over tightened. There we go. And then I've got the oil filter housing under here as well. Let's see if I can get into that without getting covered in oil. Absolutely no need for that to be that tight. In my defence, I think the oil and filter has been changed since I built the engine. Don't Don't blame me. It wasn't me. It was never me. No real way to do that without getting covered in oil, to be honest. I should have put gloves on. So with the new filter, you obviously get new O-rings. So let's fit a new O-ring on the housing bolt. Like that. It's nice and oily by virtue of my hands being oily. And that slide into there nicely. Just like that. Okay, that's the new filter on. And then I'll just fit a new O-ring as well. Just getting it nice and oily. Like that. So a new sump plug and copper washer to complete the deal. We'll just nip that up. Sump plugs don't need to be that tight, just enough to crush the washer. That's plenty. Enough to crush the washer, which makes the seal. A nice spritz with brake cleaner. Clean it all up. Last thing to do is to fill it back up with oil. Flavor of your choice. That's 2.5 litres gone in, 2.9 apparently with a filter change, but always best to err on the side of caution. Put a little bit less than you need, just a little bit less. Run the bike and then check your sight glass and see if it needs any more. Bike and run. Just gonna have a wee look for any obvious leaks. Nah, we're golden. So now that the oil's gone through the engine and filled the oil filter cartridge housing case bit, the oil level will have dropped in the sight glass. Yeah, just a bit. So just take a little top up of oil and then that's done. So spark plugs, oil and filter changed. That makes for a happy bike. Yeah, get that reg rec. We should be golden. Right, with the oil changed, that's the bike more or less done for servicing, and we've obviously sorted that short and diagnosed what the issue is. So regulator rectifier in the post, get that and I'll fit it, and then hopefully that should be the electrical issues sorted and then we can move on to the little fabrication jobs that we need to do. I will save them for the next episode on this bike. Hopefully you've enjoyed a little bit of a change, a little bit of content on this cool little bike from my past. Still got the XV750 in the shed over here, but I'm kind of focusing in on this one just a little bit just now, whilst just ticking off some little minor jobs on the XV750 at the same time. So yeah, hopefully, like I say, when we get that rec, that will all be done, and then we've got a plate hanger to fabricate and a mud guard and maybe a little hugger to do as well. So yeah, plenty of work left to do on this little bike. As usual, please do give me a like, leave me a comment, and make sure you subscribe to the Shoogly Shed channel. I appreciate all the support. I will see you next time. Take care. Goodbye.